Hello, hello. This is Archetypal Hour, a radio show hosted on the Broom Discord. I am joined by some friends here today, and we are vibing and talking about vibing. And we were just getting started talking about something that Anna had done recently for, actually, I'll let her describe it. But yeah, so I'll say one thing though, before we hit record, we were talking a little bit about like Jupiter moving into sidereal Taurus, and talking a little bit about like Taurus as a sign of like things coming into form. And it feels, I'm going to say that because it feels related to, I think, the direction that I was feeling like Anna wanted to bring in some shapes and forms that were in her fields.
Yeah, thank you for setting that up, Adam.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was telling Adam how so I wrote something recently in the Discord about like planting seeds that I had like planned on planting seeds. And I didn't end up I haven't planted the seeds yet. I'm talking about like literal seeds, by the way. I'm not talking about like figurative seeds, since I know some people use that phrase figuratively a lot. Like, what seeds are you planting, you know?
Yes.
But
Yes.
yeah, just to
Especially
be
here.
clear, I'm talking about literal seeds. Um, and I was just telling Adam that like planting the literal seeds was actually like bringing up so much resistance for me, and I thought that that was really fascinating. And it like is bringing up a lot of resistance for me. So I'm kind of like, wow, this is just really juicy. Like I'm just
Yes.
like working through whatever like planting these literal seeds is like activating in my field, and I'm just like, okay, very interesting.
It really is. I also just want to call out, like, I think it's so fun and says a lot about where you're at these days to be like, look at resistance almost like in a fun curiosity way. Like you're doing like, okay, huh, what is this resistance about? So I just appreciate that vibe a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it feels very like investigative, you know?
Mm-hmm. So yeah,
Yeah.
what's going on? Resistance planting seeds. Very interesting indeed.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about like, so Jupiter moving into sidereal Taurus. We were talking about that. Um, and you had mentioned like you feel like there are things that are like moving into form.
Mm.
And then I was saying, like, I feel like I've been feeling that for the past couple of months, that there are things that are taking form.
Mm.
And I feel like that feels like an abstract, like it could be an abstract concept, like
Mm-hmm.
to say something is taking form,
Mm-hmm.
but it feels really visceral in my body. And I'm like, I guess I'm gonna like hold space for myself to describe how it feels visceral. Um, and I'm also curious, like, for other people, how it feels for them to say that like something is taking form. Like
I'm
maybe
sm-
for you, Adam, or anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to hear from others because I feel like I was smiling when you said that because I felt like I had known that visceral feeling, but I also like struggling to like bring it back up or find a way to describe it in this moment. But yes, there is like a felt, or at least for me, I've a felt sense of like, oh, something's going down, something's coming this way, something's in, and then but not really. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like for me, maybe like stomach a little bit is coming up right now. I'm gonna sit with it more, but yeah, I have some thoughts on this. But I want to see if anyone else. I love how the question is like about the body too. Like, have we sensed that kind of feeling in our body, and what has that felt like before?
Yeah. What
Mm.
came up for me when you were speaking was like you said something is going down, and I was just thinking about roots. And
Mm.
I noticed that like both of our profile pictures on Discord right now have
Yes,
roots.
true, That is funny. And I actually, when I was talking to Hoda, I think I said tectonic plates at some point. Like I felt like there was plate shifting. So that's very much what you're saying too. Like it's
Mm.
low feelings for me a little bit. So maybe there's like some bottom of the souls or something like I don't know,
Mm.
like stirring underneath. Uh
Bottom of the souls.
yeah.
That's really evocative to me.
Mm.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, what it evoked for me, because I have almost 7-year-old daughter, was a song from the Trolls movie.
What's the song?
The Justin Timberlake song about got that good souls on my under my feet.
I mean, I don't know it, but like, maybe it has some maybe it has some message for us,
There's the I got that sunshine in my pocket, got them good souls on my feet or under my feet. Um, you've definitely heard it. It was on. It was literally. It was just everywhere. I'm probably not just doing it any justice, but it's like I know that one.
I'll take your word for
Yeah,
it.
Justin's got that sunshine in his pocket. Um, let's not bring him into the container. But yeah, the question was like, yeah, feeling like things are taking shape. Like, has anyone else felt that sense before? It feels related to some conversations that I've been having with like a few people, I think, but I'm thinking of Boone right now. Like
Mm.
a video from Formscapes in library. For anyone that's looking for it, basically, it's the log. The very short version is, um, it talks a lot about this sort of. There's a term they use, concrescence, but like this coming together of potentialities and sort of inherited movements or patterns, coming,
Mm.
from what's already happened before, from the current reality, um,
Uh,
and that's kind of like coming up for me, like with this conversation about things coming from below, but also like looking or trying to sense shapes that are coming our way. This
mm.
idea of like the now I'm like feeling like because I don't know, I'm curious what others think, but like I'm feeling into like that whole question of like fate and the future also being wide open, like that space where like everything happens, where it could go a couple different directions. Actually, that exciting space. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, for me, like that can be really exciting to feel like, oh, there's some big choices, like there's some big possibilities opening up, um,
Mhm.
and like feel into that. But it can also be really dysregulating to feel that too, or at least for me.
Mm. Interesting. The other context that I have, um, for cosmic movement, for what you just said, was there's also that I've been tuning into is there's also a new moon in Taurus happening this week,
Mm,
and
yes.
I think in tropical astrology, I think it's gonna be close to Uranus in Taurus,
Mm,
and Jupiter too. Excuse me, Jupiter too, because Jupiter and Uranus were just
yeah.
conjunct. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, what you were saying about all the potentials kind of like being laid out, and I feel like that maybe the new moon in Taurus is like choosing
Mm.
choosing one, which is terrifying to me.
Oh.
Like, and I think that's what's interesting too about like feeling resistance to planting seeds, because it's like I think that like transition between like a possibility that exists like in the ethers, and then like once there's something about like that transition from like things going from like being like etheric into like taking form, like there's something about that feels like kind of daunting to me personally. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure why, but
Yeah.
I guess it's because like hmm, I don't know, it's so interesting because I guess there is a sense of like there is no turning back.
Mm,
If you like plant a seed, you know, it's like you've really committed to like nurturing life and like
mm,
seeing something through. Um, and I feel like we've talked about like stability in archetypal hour before too.
mm. I think we have, yeah.
And that's really interesting to me because I think that sometimes like there is like a density that occurs like with earth and form that like feels um like unfamiliar to me maybe,
Mm,
which is weird because like in tropical astrology I have a grand like a grand earth trine in my chart, so you'd think that like I am really comfortable with the earth element and like I can really like traverse and like navigate it with ease, but I think that like, well, I don't know, in sidereal astrology I'm pretty sure I'm like uh pretty Pisces dominant.
mm.
It's just all very interesting to me.
Yeah. I mean, I have so many thoughts about both pieces, but I'm just like the piece about the astrology too. I'd say that like I do think sometimes some of our strong placements are so amplified it also makes them hard to see, I guess too. But I think that jump between
Mm-hmm.
tropical and stereo is really interesting because I have a Taurus stellium in the tropical, but
Right.
in the sidereal it's like spread out between Aries, Sun and Mars, Taurus. It's got Mercury and Venus, and so and Uranus, and so
Mm-hmm.
like really interesting those like yeah, the differences across the systems, and what you kind of feel into. But I feel like it's interesting you say that you kind of feel like you struggle with the earth and have a lot of earth energy. Like I also feel like that's probably not a coincidence in the sense of like
Yeah.
I do think that the energies that we have that are prominent in our birth charts do deal with karmas that are like we got to deal with. So it's like we got to deal with some
Yes.
earthly shit while we're here, you know?
Absolutely. And I feel like I tend to also like through talking about like tropical and sidereal astrology in the broom, I feel like I've kind of come to this understanding of like maybe tropical as like saying something about the karma that we're like ripening in this lifetime. And so it does feel pretty apt.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like maybe it's not something that comes naturally to me, but it is something that I'm like working on, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. I'm just like feeling into like the resistance two piece you were saying, and I also couldn't help but think of the good seed parable from the New Testament. But I want to just check in on. I know we've talked a lot about a lot of different points, but want to check in with anyone that's also here live if they want to come off mute and share anything that's popping or that you're thinking about now, or share something in the chat. Also, the new moon. While I'm waiting for that, I'll say no. Let me hold a little more space. My apologies. Oh, the good seed, yeah. Well, I also say one last thing I'll say about the new moon, or one quick thing, is the new moon is in Barony in Sidereal. So that's Sidereal Aries, but still it's the fixed star Barony. And yeah, that's Yama's turf. That's Yama's nakshatra, who we've been talking about, I feel like, a lot in the server and in the space we've shared some of his wisdom codes not too long ago. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool, Hoda. Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to find. Yeah, the good seed is from Matthew. It's a short little parable, but I do think it's nice, and I think it has a relationship to like some of the hesitancy with the seeds. Maybe we'll see if it's does anything. So chapter 13. Where am I at? 24. Uh-huh. Yeah, I guess it's here. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the seaside. And many people gathered around him, so that he had to go up and sit in a boat, and all the people stood on the seashore. And he spoke many things to them in parables, and said, Behold, the sower went out to sow. And when he had sown, some seed fell on the roadside, and the fowls came and they ate it. Other fell upon the rock where there was not sufficient soil, and it sprang up earlier because the ground was not deep enough. But when the sun shone, it was scorched, and because it had no root, it dried up. And other fell among the thistles, and the thistles sprung up, and they choked it. And other fell in good soil, and bore fruit, some 100, some 60, some 30. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. That's like the short version. And then, um, yeah, that's the short version. And then the disciples are like, in the story, the disciples are like, yeah, that's some good stuff, Jesus. And then they walk away, and then they're like, yo, Jesus, what the hell were you talking about out there? What was that parable? Which is like my favorite pattern in the New Testament when the disciples are like, what you saying, dude? Hmm.
What do you make of it, Adam? The parable, that is.
I mean, for me, it's really just about being mindful about where you plant things. Like when I think of seeds these days, obviously I think it's good advice for gardening, right? The soil matters deeply, and
Yeah.
any gardener will tell you that. And I think, but
Hmm.
for me, like as someone who does have a lot of ideas, I think of seeds as ideas also, or ideas as seeds.
Yeah.
And it could just be like a thing that you want to do, or in the future, right, or something you want to set in motion, and how when you spread the seed all over the place, like yeah, that's not you're going to get lots of ideas and a lot of unresolved things that you put out there. So that's what comes up for me with this. What about you?
Hmm. The word unresolved is standing out to me from what you said.
Yeah.
Because I feel like unresolved in the context that you are speaking made me think of like something that hasn't taken form yet.
Hmm. Yeah, it is a weird word choice now that you mention it, especially with ideas where like some ideas they don't need a resolution, but maybe they're not like closed out formally, or it's still like why did I throw the seed
Mhm.
out? So it's an interesting word choice. You're right. Thank you for calling attention to it. No, because
Yeah.
sometimes I don't know why some of these words come out my mouth. We should
No,
investigate.
I relate. It's like, yeah, I feel like our word choice can often tell us a lot about like
Yeah,
where we're at, obviously.
truthfully. So I got some stuff to resolve. Mm.
About unresolved, about being unresolved.
Yeah. And I'm also like thinking of the word resolute now. And how sometimes I lack that resoluteness in continuing to execute a seed that I planted because I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. And it's like, oh shit, I gotta really like nurture this idea. I don't think I got enough juice to nurture that one and that one and that one. Especially that one I put over there. Like I don't even know why I put that one there.
I don't know why I'm laughing so hard, but I feel like it's just because I can relate so much. Like I feel so much resonance with that.
Uh,
And I feel like
yeah.
it has like come up in conversations between you and I before that we're both like uh we both have like experiences with this.
Yes. Yes. Oh
It's really
man. That earth element needs some of that earth element wisdom. Mm, so much fire, water, air.
yeah, it makes me think of like the archetype of Gemini where it's just like you're tossing out the seeds. You're just like you're walking along the path and just like reaching in your pocket and like just sprinkle a little bit here, sprinkle a little bit there. just just to see like what will happen.
Yeah. I do love that energy though, but it can be a lot. It's
Yeah,
hard
I
for
love
things
it
to come
too.
into form when there's so many ideas swirling and so much movement and so much like lack of follow through. Oh, it's
Mhm.
exciting to be around that energy though. That's my problem
Yeah,
too. I get excited by all the different ideas and possibilities.
me too.
Ooh. Hoda asks, would y'all say sowing seeds is just as important as holding space? What came up for me was like the necessity to have the both, right? Like if you got a space but nothing growing in it, okay. Like, that sounds kind of boring. There's no life. But then again, maybe there's enough. There's no need for regeneration. But I think maybe because I've been on Earth and that's all I know and experience, I think there is a beauty in like the cycle of regeneration and death and new seeds. But yeah, I feel like they're both really important and they play off each other, holding space and sowing seeds. Mm. Hoda continues, how important are those processes to being able to bring something into fruition? To not bring it into fruition? Wait. Mm. Mm. Feel like we're talking about the process of making things actually happen, bringing them real. Mm.
I mean, what kind of comes up for me is like, this is why I need to collaborate with other people.
Mm.
Like, because if you think about like a garden or like a forest or something, um, that's like, there's like a key about like biodiversity and just like there being other life forms.
Wow. That loud groan was also like just so much resonance. Because it's been coming up a lot for me too, where like I'm kind of like up against some things at work where I'm like, and I'm at the age where I'm like, it's not that I just don't want to learn these. Maybe I'm getting old enough where I'm like, I don't want to learn this. But it's one of those things
Mhm.
where it's also like that skill ain't got nothing to do with the stuff that I've already been cultivating. I want to just keep doing. I want to keep refining the things I got. You know, I don't. I don't want to go
Yeah,
into this other new area. I'm trying to conserve my energy.
right. And it's
Um,
like, yeah, finding out like where your energy is best utilized, you know?
yeah, and but it's been coming up for me that like I really need to be in the collaborative places because,
Hmm.
yeah, like bringing things into fruition like in a very linear way is just so outside of my comfort zone. Like I need people like that within my orbit so that we're part of that team so that things can actually happen.
Right, because there's different processes that need to take place,
Hmm.
and we can't do all of them.
No, no. And when you were talking about the garden before, I pictured myself as like a little butterfly or like a bee, like a pollinator. Like
Yeah.
I want to go explore and touch all the little flowers, right? And see what added to the collective honey. Like that sounds
Yeah.
like a dope role for me, you know? But
Right.
but I want to be able to explore a little bit instead of having to do one thing.
Right. And then it's like, how do you do that in a way that like is refined and also
Hmm.
um
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like there's a pressure sometimes, excuse me, that I feel to like complete all of the processes, which is like why I feel like or what I feel like came up for me when I read Hoda's question about like sowing seeds being as important as holding space, or like even sowing seeds as being important as like because I'm struggling to find like in this metaphor, like if there's like pollinating and there's like sowing seeds, what is the part where like what is the follow through part in this metaphor?
Now that is
I,
very interesting. That is a really interesting question to me because, like, when I picture follow through, like, it depends on, I guess, what we're following through. Like, if it's follow through in like the way that I would think, like with my linear, like human, like just like yeah, the follow through would be like the gardeners, like the humans doing it. But like when you think about the follow through of like the actual garden, they're just living.
right.
And that's so fascinating to be like, wow, that's what I want to get to, where I'm just like flowing, like this shit's just flowing through me, and I'm just living. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
because the doing part of like the follow through is so frustrating, which is why I like these traditions that are really about cultivating these resonances and states of mind, states of being where you are not so much doing, even while you're, you know, making things happen.
Right.
Hmm.
Right.
But I don't know, yeah, what others think about the follow through, and yeah, just curious what people are. I know we are in a metaphor here that's can get a little dense, but it's kind of you're going to be somewhere that's a little bit odd, like a mysterious garden, a forest, or something. Like we'll have some flexibility and fun, so the metaphor doesn't choke us.
Yeah, I mean, I when I asked the question, I like wasn't entirely certain where it would go, but I just figured I would ask it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it just relates to this whole question that you started this off with of like the resistance about planting seeds and like these processes that have to happen and the length of time and all the work that required for the process to complete. You know. Mm.
Yeah.
I'm feeling like maybe we could. I don't know. I'm not really sure where to go here.
Me neither. I'm just like feeling into the like
Yeah.
different containers of like on the one hand the like beingness and on the other hand like the doingness. Like those are the containers that feel like alive to me right now.
Mm. Yeah, I'm curious what others might be sensing.
Hmm.
Interesting one though. Well, not hearing anyone. I think we should go for it, Anna. Um, yeah, what anything that you're feeling in particularly drawn to, like a question or something to chew on or a vibe. But yeah, this is one where I feel like I wish I felt like I had more fluency in really um knowing the difference.
In terms of like, in terms of which part?
Just like this sense of like it's I guess what I'm saying is like maybe knowing's not the right word. I guess for me it's more just like talking about this in any kind of way that's like comprehensible, even to myself.
I mean, I understand for sure. Yeah.
Mm. Because I feel like those moments when there's just no thought and there's just no whiff of self consciousness, and there's ease and there's movement and just that sense of like, yeah, like you're in the thick of it, but you ain't thinking about nothing. There's no real effort being put into it, even though there's movement.
You know what?
Mm.
Something occurred to me, but I don't know. I'll do my best to translate. But like I guess what was kind of coming up for me was like, how do you, once you're like kind of confronted with like the two different containers of like doing and being, it's like, how do you, and I don't know if this is going to make sense, but whatever, I'm going to keep going for it. How do you like do the doing in a way that like becomes being?
Mm. Hmm.
Does that make any sense? I mean, I'm kind of guessing by the noises that you're making that sort of.
No, the question makes sense. I don't. I'm like curious what nothing's coming up right away, but like it's just like wow, yeah, that's a juicy one right there. I'm not sure if anything's coming up for anyone that's uh with us, but yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, please.
No, I was just like I'm just kind of meditating on like approaching like doing this from a place of beingness. And like I guess in this metaphor it would be like doing this as like um what happens after you plant a seed, you know? Like
Hmm.
how you were talking about like the humans in the garden. So it's like, well, after you plant a seed, you like go and you check on the seed and you like, you know, you like observe the conditions of like the environment. You like observe like the conditions of the soil. You know, you like make adjustments when needed, etc., etc. And like maybe there is like some sort of like interference or like egregore that like can make it seem like that process of doing is separated from the process of being, as
Mm,
in like the process of like, well, you know, you plant a seed and then like the seed just grows, like you don't like do anything.
mm.
I really have no idea where I'm going with this.
No, no, I think
I'm just vibing.
no, that's cool. I mean, that's where I'm at too. And like what came up for me, like hearing you say, is like this, this is not really like a dichotomy. Like I don't think it does make sense to like necessarily put them like against each other, like they're opposites or like they don't
Right.
overlap in significant ways. I think there's
Yeah.
significant overlap between these, yeah. And so I
Right.
think it's like, yeah, I think it's more like that overlap, less so than like that, what's the difference, the gulf between them. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like how we can like, um, how we can like go about merging them or something, you know?
Yeah, that space. That's
Right.
where they're shared, where you're being and while you're doing while
Yeah.
being like, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just so funny to me because like right now I'm struggling with this, but like because I think this is just one piece of it. Maybe this in my experience, this feels like it's connected to this conversation about being and doing is like the
Mhm.
inner dialogue, right? Like that voice or set of voices, those thoughts, however you might want to describe what a thought is, and different
Mhm.
kinds of thoughts, but like that chatter, um, and the difference between states of mind where there's not any chatter. There's just not any conversation about it. There's not even
Yeah.
necessarily an observer. You're just it is.
Right. And I'm like, well, I feel like for me, the point, not that there like always needs to be a goal or like a point, but I'm like, isn't the whole point of like what I'm trying to like live into, wouldn't it be like to be able to approach that doing with beingness, like to be able to like, yeah,
Mm, feels
like
like
isn't
it.
that the whole thing?
I mean, if for someone, and it feels
For
like it
me,
might be for you.
I don't know.
I mean, it feels good to me too. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like Hope is bubbling right now. I don't know, but I mean, I feel like this is one of those weird conversations. It's like, oh, I don't know where to jump in
Might
here.
be a projection, but I'm willing to be wrong.
Yeah. Just thinking about this question and these vibes of being and doing. Like, oh man, it's so
Go
hard.
on.
No, I
Go
just
on.
it didn't really feel like it was coherent enough. You know what I mean? Talk about
I don't feel like anything I've said is coherent enough, so I would love to hear.
coherence ain't the goal here. That's funny. I'm gonna read some. Okay, hold is eating a little bit. That's funny. I guess what does come up is the dialect of trying to make sense of things that are already coexisting together can be difficult. Not impossible, lol. But I don't see doing or being as separate at all. Dialectic, yeah, yeah. Like this was that. Like yeah, trying to more like live into like okay, what's this overlap? How are these intersecting? What is this feeling of being? I feel like is maybe more interesting because like obviously we can't help but be like we're being we exist like Hamlet right to be or not to be like we being we here so it's
Mm-hmm.
not we're not being right and we're always doing something most of us I mean maybe I guess if we're like totally surfed and melted into our furniture our couch and disassociated but even that's doing something something's doing something right the body's never stopping so like we're always being and doing anyway but yeah
Yeah,
but like I feel like what we're pointing to is yeah something deeper than that, right? Or a vibe, I guess.
I'm gonna read aloud what Hoda said and
Okay.
see if anything happens because I think it's interesting. I guess what does come up is even though you already read it out loud. I guess what does come up is the dialect of trying to make sense of things that are already coexisting together. And it's like, it's funny, Hoda, because I'm like, when I read that, I'm like, yeah, of course I know on an intellectual level that like being and doing coexist. But at the same time, what I'm feeling into is like, why? So, like, on a somatic level, it just doesn't translate that way to me. So I'm just curious about that. They wane and wax among one another to create momentum.
Ooh.
That's really beautiful. Inspo direction, but those things for me arise from the covalence of being and doing. Totally.
Mm.
Thank you for those
Yeah.
contemplations. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't see being or doing as separate. Um, I mean, like, I can see how they're not on one level, and yet in my felt, like in my body's experience, they are separate. Because then it's like, then why else would I feel resistance in planting seeds? Like
Mm.
there's clearly something, which is fascinating.
Mm. I'm like thank you for bringing back that original question because now I'm really curious like what might be a negative thing that you think you're sensing could happen if you plant that seed or is it not feel like
Right. That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, what thought forms are like in the way? Because it's like, well, okay, what happens when you plant the seed? Then like, what if um I don't know, like what if it dies? Okay.
mm-hmm.
So fucking what?
Mm-hmm.
Or like, what if I miss a day of like watering the seed
Mm-hmm.
again? So fucking what?
Mm-hmm.
It's just really interesting. It's like the thought forms that get in the way. I don't know how you would classify them, but um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think there do exist like egregores and thought forms that like create a separation between being and doing that
Mm,
that exist in this earthly realm for me.
mm. We're thinking about this, and like right now, it sounds like. I guess I'm curious if you can recall like the last time you almost planted them, because like sometimes I want to do something, but then I keep remembering to do it at times where it's just like not appropriate, and so like
Mhm.
some of the reason why I don't do things is because I'm a space cadet also, which maybe is a whole other set of thought forms. But like, yeah, it's really hard to. But I am curious, like, does it feel like can you like distinctly recall like being like, oh, I should go do that now, and then be like, no, that's not happening now.
I feel like it's been like the past whenever since I um since I said I was going to plant them in like the tending channel, I feel like I've been like going back and forth.
Mm. So there's a little bit of like an internal debate or disagreement about it.
Yeah, and I'm just like I feel like
Mm.
I'm clearing I'm like working through something, you know?
Super interesting.
Or like maybe I'm like closing the gap between being and doing or something. I don't know.
Mm. Mm, mm, mm. To seed or not to seed? That is the question. Mm. Maybe there's like, I think what's funny too is like the more that we talk about it, the more like attention this decision is getting. And it's like, does that feed it more? Does that help or does that further make it more difficult actually to
I don't
resolve?
know. I mean, I feel like this conversation has been helpful for me
That is good.
personally.
Well, that's good to hear. It is really fun sometimes, like trying to shake it loose, like you said, that vibe you had of curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm kind of going back to that piece about like bringing things into reality and things shifting and trying to sense into shifts as they happen and trying to feel into what things are feeling possible, what kind of moves feel possible to us,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, what kind of shapes or modes or moves or forms might help us also like anticipate or kind of deal with what feels like it's coming our way. But I
Yeah.
know not. I'm like sitting with it for myself. I'm curious if anything's bubbling for anyone. Oh, Psychonaut came in with a ninja icon, which feels kind of funny to me. I don't think he
Oh,
heard
like,
the question, but it was like, that's the mode the Psychonaut's feeling. Like a ninja.
does that mean you're trying to like not be a part of the conversation, Psychonaut?
I think he's like,
Is that like I'm observing?
he's poised.
Not to put you on blast.
We just vibing today anyway, Psychonaut.
Anyway, I'm still just really intrigued about how the earth element just always feels more permanent to me.
Mm. Which is funny because everything earthly passes away at some point.
Right, like it's not, but like for some reason it feels more permanent.
Mm. Mm. Huh. That's really interesting. Yeah, Hoda asked, like, it has staying power, solidity? Question mark.
Yes, both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is
Yeah,
denser.
sure is.
It's denser. So I guess to me, in some way, density is equate I equate density to permanence, which is interesting because I'm not certain that that's actually true.
Mm,
Like,
I
just because
mean,
something is denser doesn't mean it's permanent. It's just
no,
denser.
just like how to use that word, like solid. Like I think
Right.
of
It's
like,
like,
yeah.
yeah, like as I'm like talking about it out loud, I'm like, and hearing you say that, Adam, I'm like, yeah, like nothing that's dense is like everything also, like we're humans.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody dies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah, like I mean, I think about like even at the subatomic level, right? Like everything's in motion, but some things have a magnetic force that makes them appear solid. Like, but they are solid; they're more solid. Like
mm,
the electrons picked where they want to be at, and they're tending to stay there unless the field changes and suddenly some shapes come their way. And if they're let's say a table and a bar, suddenly their integrity is no longer sound because someone just got thrown through the table in a bar fight. No longer their integrity gone, no longer stable, no longer permanent. But things were feeling so solid for that table. Mm.
I'm also like thinking about this. I guess I've like been contemplating this for a really long time because I'm remembering I like tweeted something like a couple of summers ago about how like, man, let me see if I can find it actually. It was a pretty good one.
Hold
It
up.
was
Oh,
about
sorry. I was gonna say hold up. I'm mad at her because now I got Andre 3000 in my head.
let's see.
Know you'd like to think your shit don't stink, but lean a little bit closer.
Hey, apparently I've like written a lot about potential as I'm
Mm,
searching my tweets. I typed in potential and there's a lot here.
so much potential, Anna.
I have so much
You've
potential.
got so much potential in your Twitter feed.
Let me see. What else can I search for? Possibility, maybe?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Roses really smell like poo poo poo. Roses really smell like poo poo poo. I do think about that often, though. Um, the idea of potential and potential energy and trying to feel into it. I think that's probably why it came up earlier today, too. Like, oh, that's always on my mind. So it's really interesting. It shows up in your Twitter lists a lot, your
Yeah.
timeline.
How do you feel like it relates to this?
Well, I mean, I guess like this idea of like trying to feel into things that are coming, like like this shift of like things become that are potential and then becoming more like possible or probable, like all those different words of like stages or phases of something coming into actual form.
Word. Okay, I found the tweet that I was thinking of. I feel like it's like a little bit of cope, but I also feel like it's kind of poignant for this. Um, Apparently, at the time that I wrote it, I was dissolving the distortion that committing to one path automatically dwindles down my options and ability to pursue many paths, and I am trapped.
Mm.
Whereas in reality, committing to one path creates space for infinite options to emerge.
Mm.
Mm. I guess because, yeah, I just get the image of um, like different like lines that like um that like the image that I'm seeing in my head difficult to is difficult to translate, but like, in math, when there's like two options, like there's like one thing, and then you draw a line up and you draw a line down, and then like from those two lines, then you draw two other lines, and then from those lines you draw two other lines, and then from those lines you draw two other lines. You know what I'm talking about?
I don't know that exact thing, but I'm trying to feel into it for sure. Like, and so yeah, like what's the image that comes when you do this line? Like, is it like it sounds like it's like forming like a web.
It's like a wet, but it's like just because you like choose, you like go down one line doesn't mean that like there aren't like it's like when you go towards one, it's like more open up for you. It's not like, yeah, choice points. It's not like
Mm.
you. Well, I also feel like Nobu maybe talked about this at some point where like when you make a decision, like there like you have to like dead other possibilities. So like you could focus on like the deading of other possibilities, but then it's like, but in reality, there's like more possibilities that open up when you
Hmm.
make a decision. Is like I feel like that's maybe what I'm trying to say, but
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I, I do. And I feel like it's kind of like for some reason the analogy that's coming up in my mind is like a role playing game or like a video game where like you got to choose one of these side quests. You got to choose a quest or a path in order to start getting some choices, right? Some options, some things are going to come into your field now that you're on a path, right? Because you're going to interact with people. There's going to be choices. There's going to be trade offs. There's going to be all kinds of things,
exactly.
all these geometries. But if we're still on the loading screen where we just pass the tutorial and we're not moving into any path, then we're not getting anything.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes we like project that like there are those choice points when we're just like on a loading screen or something. Because
Mm.
like we can imagine them, but that doesn't mean that they're like happening.
Ooh.
And for those of us who have active imaginations, I would
Yeah,
say
we can go pretty
sometimes it's
far.
easy to get stuck there.
You can go pretty far actually in that path and be like, oh, that's right. This is a daydream. Hoda says, I guess I call it timeline mechanics, colon dilation. Mm.
It definitely feels like quantum. Like what I was
Mm.
seeing in my mind's eye felt like pretty like
Mm.
yeah, it is the work of getting unstuck from fantasy. Absolutely.
Yeah, and bringing it back to earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny too because like I do feel like there's a part of that kind of imaginal work that can be super fruitful where like
Yeah,
and project out
definitely.
and start shaping things that are in the future in the mental realm, in the imaginal realm. But it's
Right.
so easy to go down like these sort of make some weird choice points, and suddenly you find yourself in like terrain that like none of this space can ever become reality. I've veered way
Right.
too far off now, and I gotta dial myself back to that place where like, hey, now I can actually shape and project out in a healthy way like how a lot of like athletes and people talk about like certain visualization techniques where like it's like, oh, I already won the game, and it's not like, oh, I won the
Totally.
game like I thought about winning the game. It's like, no, they really experienced something in their imagination that was felt, that happened.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like you can't, to me, it's like I don't feel like I can really like activate something in the material realm if I can't imagine it,
Interesting.
which is something that I've been thinking a lot about recently. Like if I can't see it in my mind's eye, how is it gonna like manifest, on the material plane?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Like if I don't
Uh,
believe something is possible, then like it's not gonna happen.
yeah, and there's a lot of like I'm thinking of some of the coaching classes and things I've read, and there's some theories that that really kind of lean into that as part of the coaching method. That like if the coachee is not able to like imagine and have a real clear vision of a place they're trying to get to in their life, even if it's like just a different way of being, then it's very difficult to help them, because like there's something that has to be seen or felt that can really serve as helpful like motivation along the way to the actual
Totally.
spot.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I see some really good stuff in the chat. I'm trying to think if I can try to read it out loud, but I'm wondering if it might be better if anyone feels like they want to come off mute and share. If not, I can definitely read.
Yeah. Hey, Adam. Hey, Anna.
Hey.
What's up? I wanted to just hop on and read what I said out loud because I feel like it related to what Anna was describing about like her visualization process. And like for me, I just call it something different. I think because like the way that I learned it was like in different contexts. But usually when I am speaking to timeline mechanics, not just with y'all, but like in the wild, it usually speaks to like kind of getting unstuck around those choice points and like the act of making them. And I'm not going to read out what Psychonaut says, but I know that some people speak to, and Psychonaut calls it analysis paralysis in some cases, some lineages, But yeah, it definitely does feel connected to me, especially with what y'all are saying about kind of turning a dream into reality. And a lot of the times I look at reality in different swaths of time. And so being able to work with yourself to like kind of free up some of that energy that's going into the phantasmal realm and kind of bringing it down to earth. It's like it takes work, but I do feel like it's so worth it, because I do feel like sometimes even when I'm making choices, sometimes I find that the salience of a timeline is what makes it the most alive for me. Like it actually makes sense, And so sometimes I'll choose it, and sometimes I make choices that don't make sense, like logically, but they make sense on another, more macro level. And so, yeah, I just kind of wanted to speak to some of the things that I wrote in the chat, but I definitely appreciate this conversation.
Yeah. Now, this feels like some stuff that feels related to, I think, a conversation that was not recorded not long ago, but about the sort of like going into the timeline piece. And like, I'm so glad you said it, because it's helping me realize that like part of my hang up, I feel like sometimes, is sensing into that as its own potentiality versus like, I think there's a difference between sort of that projecting imaginal in creating something that's totally not there already, but it's a project that you really feel strongly about and you really want to like bring into the world and bring into expression. And that's such a beautiful thing, whether that's for yourself or for others or for your community. Like, it's such a beautiful thing. But like, I also feel like I'm at a place where like I don't feel that strongly about bringing anything specific. Like, I'm more like really desiring the ability to actually sense into actual shapes that are in my field in the future as possibilities, so that I can make better choices that get me into these timelines where I can be more helpful or more useful or more fun and joyful and easeful, whatever, all the things, right? And so like it's so hard because I'm still in that state of mind where like it is like my understanding of these kinds of techniques is more about like projecting out versus receiving, and then co-creating in a projected space, but that you got there through a receiving, and if that makes any sense at all. Or like I'll be wandering out there, but I don't know if I'm stumbling more like, yeah, like you're saying, like in these sort of like phantasmical realms or realms of possibility that are more grounded and are more like actual possibility. If that makes any sense. Thank you. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, and like I like what you said, Hoda. She says, yes, I feel like it speaks to being at different places on a larger path of discovering how to use your energy. Man, that is a mouthful, because I feel like in my work too, I talk a lot about energy with my clients too, because there's so little of it. Like there's so much like energy that we have to expend whether we want to or not on just like the routine mechanics of daily living, and then we have all these other things, these extra moves that we have to make to get out of the situation that we're in or into a different situation that we want to be in. And it's just, it's so much of the work is sometimes first cutting shit out of your life that is just draining your energy, because it's so difficult to do anything without energy. Mm. I wanted to go back to that. Oh, okay. Hoda had mentioned something too. Yeah, some lineages are still introducing the metaphysical reality into their cosmology of reality, in my opinion. Mm. Mm. This is okay. This is a longer chat conversation, so I'm gonna try to. Yeah. Mm. Talking metaphysics in the chat, so I'm like, I don't know how to easily synthesize. I wonder if anyone wants to just come off mute of what's alive for you in these conversations.
Well, I personally I feel like Hoda, this point about like some lineages are still introducing the metaphysical reality into their cosmology of reality is like very um that's like really powerful to me to like hear you say that, because I'm like probably like reading it, I'm like it gives me a bit of like distance, because I also responded and I said in response to what Hoda said about that, I said I feel like this sheds a lot of light on the tension I presented at the beginning of this episode. Like maybe there are lineages I am part of that recognize that metaphysical aspect of reality, and others and other lineages that are like, yeah, right, bro.
Mm.
Um so yeah, that's really interesting. And I feel like it's often hard. It can be hard for me to like get the distance from the lineages that are like, yeah, right, bro. In order to be like, well, yeah, maybe those lineages like are just still introducing the metaphysical reality into their cosmology of reality. Like it's not like an affront. Like it's not personal.
It's definitely not personal. I like that. At least that doesn't
Like it
feel
feels so
personal.
personal to me though. Like in my body, it can feel so conflicting because I'm like, can I just like live my life?
Mm. Well, it's I will say like those points of pain are always fascinating, because I think they strike at beliefs that maybe feel load bearing or feel like they haven't fully stabilized yet, so they feel wobbly. Like it's lots of different things.
Right.
But I think whatever it points to, it's always interesting and
Yeah.
always an important part of your psyche. It feels like. Mm.
Yeah, it's just so interesting because I feel like, yeah, this conversation has like, well, specifically what you're saying, Hoda, is like helping me find so much like neutrality about it.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Hoda. And like, I mean, when I went thinking about like lineages, like I can't help but also like kind of group like what I would call like scientism, like or like the predominant kind of like more like scientific, rational, materialist sort of worldview, which I
Yeah,
held
like
for a long time.
modernism.
Yeah, maybe that's a good word. Whatever we want to call that. Whatever, I feel like we're pointing at something here, right? Whatever labels you want to
Yeah.
use, but like, yeah, like those metaphysical I feel like that's why I'm so fascinated by the quantum physics piece, because if that feels like the area where like we can finally have some more subtle or conversations about things like subtlety and things like really fine fields of potential where you really question the solidity and of like the empirical approach. And I think quantum physics is like getting closer to being a metaphysical door for that lineage. That's why I find it so exciting. I don't know if anyone else feels like that's the case or even knows what the heck I'm talking about, but because some of this might just be in my mind. Yeah.
Are you speaking of like um, I guess I'll just call it like re-indigenizing science. I know that that doesn't resonate for everybody because it's, some people are like, well, what are we re-indigenizing? But like for me, that's what it feels like.
Mm.
Is that what you're talking about?
I don't feel like I have a good enough handle on what you mean by that to like say yes or no, but I mean, I'm just gonna
Maybe
like
I can.
use. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say like for some reason like in my mind, in my psyche, I was like, I'm not really sure what to do with re-indigenize. That feels like a very set thing that I don't know much about. But I was like translating it in my head as like ancient wisdom. I don't know if that feels like it's
Yeah.
like enough of a translation.
Yeah, that resonates for me. Just like, um, maybe like holding space for like a more integrative approach to
Mm,
science,
yeah. I mean,
one that like honors metaphysical reality.
yeah. So in that case, then like, yeah, I do feel like it's connected. It's like ancient feels like ancient wisdom feels like it could be connected and like going back because yeah, like the stuff that I think I forget what it's called. I'll try to put in the chat, but it's this great stuff by Formscapes. He's a YouTube account that I highly recommend. All his stuff is so interesting. Um, but he's been talking a lot about like these stages of human evolution and different philosophers' take on that. Um, and I find it really interesting too because it lines up with a lot of the leadership stuff I've studied and been exposed to through the coaching training about like the stages of adult development and also like the stages of like a widening worldview, like kind of that path out of sort of just like dualistic thinking into more like ability to think more systemically and systems thinking and broader like that kind of thinking, and how important it is for leaders now to be able to tap into that because everything is so complex and you have to hold a lot. But like I've been thinking about like how like yeah like to bring it back to like this idea of like ancient and what I think maybe like re-indigenous is kind of pointing at of like in those Formscapes video, he talks a lot about like the archaic and like the mythical and the magical, like these older ways of seeing reality, and how like the kind of realm and the empirical approach that predominates now, sort of like went past it. Like, oh, those people, they didn't know anything. They were at such an earlier state of consciousness, and instead of thinking about it like, hey, we're at different levels. Now I'm on this level. Now I'm on that level. It's like everything's overlapping. So it's like that these new levels are great of consciousness. Like I think empiricism and that kind of like observer kind of mind type thing is really a cool evolution in human possibility. But like that doesn't mean we have to throw everything out that got us there. Like all these different modes of seeing the world have their place in the whole, and we don't want to like get so blinded by one kind of way of thinking that we're not tapping into all of them. And I don't know if that makes much sense without like all this like stuff is swimming in my head, like the Formscapes videos. But hopefully, I'm pointing to stuff that's at least. Okay, thanks, Anna.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Hmm. But it is funny, like because like yeah, we think about like science now and like how they don't believe in like a lot of like Ayurvedic practices, for instance, or a lot of traditional Chinese medicine practices, and it's like those are sciences. Like you don't because you can't prove it with one of your machines. It's not, but those are
Yeah, it's
sciences. It's a bit
interesting.
of science.
Don't believe in. It's like, what do you mean you don't believe?
This is like yeah, thousands of year old science.
Makes me think of like when people are like, well, whether or not you believe in astrology, it's still happening.
Mm.
It's like, it's raining right now.
Mm.
That's belief. That's just like what's happening.
Mm. Psychonaut asks, I think this is a good because I don't know for anyone that might be joining asynchronously. He says, I think I'm getting lost in the conversation in the delineation. Is it a delineation of a metaphysical reality and the other reality? I guess material reality. Yeah, and I think it was just talking about like some lineages having more, I guess like I want to say like guidelines or guides or more helpful information or intelligence or wisdom about certain metaphysical realities that maybe a lot of modern lineages or other lineages don't have as much to say about, where it is harder to, I don't know, I guess, I don't know why I want to say, why I wanted to say it's harder to, but like, what do you guys think? Like, I think it felt like it was in connection to sort of managing the complexity of this, but also like being able to even integrate the metaphysical beyond just sort of what you see in like linear cause and effect.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like to like maybe bring some neutrality to it is kind of like, there are like certain lineages that like got us to a certain point, and then there's like other lineages whose wisdom will like get us to another point, and it's like braiding them together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which I do feel like when you say it that way, I do feel like that's one of the most interesting things about the internet is like this sort of like global mind that is more possible now, if you want to use that metaphor of like mind, but like we're thinking about
Yeah,
the brain, like there's a lot of these connections now where we're like, hey, instead of saying like our region, our region's wisdom has the lock on it all, we're realizing, oh, we got one of the keys. There's many
right.
locks to this.
Yeah, I do feel like the internet um is like fertile soil for that to take place.
Hmm. Hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and this all started with a seed. I'm seeing the time, so I want to be mindful and respectful of everyone's time and just check in, see what anyone's feeling like they want to say before. I feel like I'm kind of curious now, and now that I'm like trying to maybe find a way to close the space. Um, about your original question and the resistance to plant the seed. I'm wondering if anything feels fresh to you with regards to that question.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like we explored like the different tensions that were like contributing to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate this container.
For those that had been vibing, I hope the vibes were helpful. And yeah, any last thoughts? Great. Oh, nap time. Love it. Love the sound of that. Well, thank you all. Thank you for that, for those of you that joined asynchronously. I feel like I'm gonna be sitting with a lot of things still, but I'm really, really grateful for this conversation. I feel like it shook several things loose, and I'm excited about that. See what unfolds. I hope it did for you too. So, thank you all, as always. Have a wonderful week. There it is. Stop, right? No, there's Craig.